On December 30, 2025, the United Arab Emirates stunned the world by announcing the complete withdrawal of its remaining military forces from Yemen. This move marked the end of a turbulent era in UAE foreign policy and exposed a deep rift with its longtime ally, Saudi Arabia. The UAE's defense ministry called it the conclusion of its counter-terrorism mission, but the timing revealed a much deeper crisis. For years, Saudi Arabia and the UAE led a coalition against the Iran-backed Houthis, but now their partnership has collapsed into open rivalry. Just hours before the announcement, Yemen's Saudi-backed government issued a 24-hour ultimatum for Emirati forces to leave, accusing the UAE of supporting separatists and undermining state authority. The UAE's exit leaves a power vacuum in southern Yemen, throwing the region's fragile security into chaos and raising urgent questions about the future of the conflict. Rather than ending the war, this withdrawal signals a shift to a new, unpredictable phase, one defined by fractured alliances and competing Gulf interests. The world is now watching as two of the region's most powerful states turn from partners to rivals, with Yemen caught in the crossfire. The Saudi Emirati intervention in Yemen began in 2015 as a united front against the Houthis, but cracks soon appeared beneath the surface. While Saudi Arabia focused on defeating the Houthis and securing its border, the UAE set its sights on southern Yemen, backing the separatist Southern Transitional Council, STC. The UAE's support for the STC, training, funding, and arming its forces, directly conflicted with Riyadh's goal of a unified Yemen. As Saudi Arabia sought a ceasefire with the Houthis and even reconciled with Iran in 2023, the UAE doubled down on its southern ambitions. Tensions escalated as the STC, with Emirati backing, advanced into oil-rich provinces near the Saudi border, crossing Riyadh's red lines. What began as a partnership against a common enemy devolved into a zero-sum rivalry, with each side viewing the other's gains as a threat. The alliance finally broke when Saudi Arabia accused the UAE of encouraging separatist advances, setting the stage for a dramatic split. The Houthis faded into the background as the real battle became one between former allies. The war for Yemen's future had become a contest for Gulf dominance. The Saudi-UAE crisis exploded into violence just before the UAE's withdrawal. Saudi warplanes struck the port of Mukalla, targeting ships from the UAE's Fujairah, claiming they carried weapons for the STC. The UAE denied the allegations, insisting the cargo was for its own counter-terrorism units. This unprecedented act of force between supposed allies shattered any illusion of unity. The airstrike was Riyadh's warning. Further STC expansion would not be tolerated. In response, the Saudi-backed Yemeni government imposed a no-fly zone and a blockade, then issued the ultimatum for Emirati forces to leave. The UAE, faced with the choice of escalation or withdrawal, chose to exit, ending its military presence but leaving the conflict unresolved. The Mukalla strike was the breaking point, turning simmering mistrust into open confrontation. The partnership that once shaped Yemen's war had collapsed in a single dramatic blow. The embers of rivalry now threatened to ignite a wider regional fire. At the heart of the Gulf Rift is Yemen's own fractured landscape, where the Southern Transitional Council, STC, has emerged as a powerful separatist force. Backed by the UAE, the STC controls much of southern Yemen, including Aden and key ports, and seeks to restore an independent South Yemen. This puts it in direct conflict with the Saudi-backed government, whose goal is a unified country. The UAE's support for the STC has fueled repeated clashes, even as both sides claim to fight the Houthis. The STC's recent push into Hadramaut and Marra, regions vital to Saudi interests, was a bold challenge to Riyadh's influence. The government, reliant on Saudi support, accused the UAE of undermining state authority and enabling separatist expansion. The seizure of oil facilities and border crossings by the STC was the final straw, transforming political rivalry into open Gulf confrontation. Yemen's internal divisions have become a proxy battlefield for its powerful neighbors. The UAE's withdrawal was triggered by a diplomatic firestorm orchestrated by Saudi Arabia. Riyadh declared the STC's advance a red line, warning the UAE that its support for separatists would no longer be tolerated. Yemen's President al-Alami, with Saudi backing, gave Emirati forces 24 hours to leave, publicly accusing the UAE of sabotaging his government. The Saudi airstrike on Mukalla raised the stakes, forcing the UAE to choose between confrontation and retreat. The UAE opted to withdraw, framing it as a voluntary end to its mission, but the STC's leader, al-Zubaydi, rejected the government's orders and reaffirmed his alliance with Abu Dhabi. The crisis exposed deep fractures within Yemen's leadership and left the core issue unresolved: the UAE's ongoing support for the STC. Even as troops depart, Emirati influence remains embedded in Yemen's south. The diplomatic standoff is far from over. The Saudi-UAE feud has alarmed Washington, which relies on both as key partners in the Middle East. Secretary of State Marco Rubio held urgent calls with Saudi officials, urging de-escalation and warning of the risks to regional security. A split between America's main Gulf allies threatens counter-terrorism efforts, intelligence sharing, and the fragile balance against Iran. The crisis also jeopardizes the fragile ceasefire in Yemen, risking a return to all-out war and undermining years of U.S. and UN diplomacy. With the anti-Houthi bloc fractured, the path to peace is more elusive than ever. The U.S. now finds itself mediating between two rivals, trying to prevent a wider conflict that could destabilize the entire Gulf. Washington's challenge is to restore focus on shared strategic goals without appearing to take sides. The stakes for global security and energy markets could not be higher. The fallout from the Saudi-Emirati split is shaking the Gulf's economic and political foundations. As OPEC+ giants, their feud threatens oil market stability, with an upcoming meeting clouded by uncertainty over production policy. The rift also weakens the Gulf Cooperation Council, undermining collective security and emboldening regional rivals. Vital maritime routes, once secured by UAE-backed forces, are now at risk, raising fears for global trade. Economic ties between the UAE and Saudi Arabia run deep, but prolonged tension could chill investment and disrupt ambitious development plans. The vision of an integrated Gulf economy is in jeopardy as the region's two largest powers drift apart. For the UAE, the crisis exposes the limits of its independent foreign policy. For Saudi Arabia, it's an assertion of dominance. The outcome will shape the Gulf's future: cooperation or competition. Amid the geopolitical drama, it's Yemen's people who suffer most. Years of war have created the world's worst humanitarian crisis, and the coalition's infighting threatens to plunge the country into deeper chaos. The UAE's withdrawal and the rise of rival factions create a security vacuum, giving extremist groups room to regroup. Escalating conflict between the STC and government forces diverts resources from desperately needed aid and services. Political paralysis cripples governance and economic recovery, with the government unable to pay salaries or rebuild. The STC's seizure of oil facilities further starves the state of revenue, deepening poverty and uncertainty. Yemen is now a battlefield for Gulf ambitions, with civilians trapped between warring factions and foreign interests. The dream of a unified, stable Yemen has never seemed more distant. As the UAE withdraws, Yemen and the Gulf face an uncertain future. The key question: will this de-escalate the crisis, or simply shift the conflict into a new, more dangerous phase? The UAE's support for the STC remains unresolved, and Saudi Arabia may press for further concessions. The STC, emboldened but isolated, must choose between political settlement and renewed conflict. The international community's priority is to prevent the collapse of the Houthi ceasefire and contain the new southern conflict. The risk is a more fragmented, intractable war that makes peace nearly impossible. The fracture in the Saudi-Emirati alliance has redrawn the region's political map, creating new dangers and perhaps new opportunities for diplomacy. For Yemenis, it means more uncertainty and fear. For the world, it's a moment to watch as the fate of a nation and the region hangs in the balance.